It was a warm spring morning in the small town of Pine Grove, where life always seemed to flow at a leisurely pace. The streets were lined with colorful houses, their gardens bursting with flowers, and children played outside without a care in the world. Among the residents of Pine Grove was a 14-year-old boy named Leo, whose life was anything but ordinary. Leo was an observant, thoughtful boy who always seemed to have a mystery on his mind. He spent much of his time reading detective novels or jotting down ideas for stories in his worn-out notebook. His room was filled with stacks of books, maps, and a small corkboard on which he pinned clues for his cases. They weren't real cases, of course, just little mysteries he dreamed up to pass the time. On this particular morning, Leo sat at the breakfast table with his younger sister, Maya, and his father. His mother, who worked as a nurse, had already left for her shift at the hospital. Maya, with her unruly pigtails and boundless energy, jabbered excitedly about a new art project at school. Leo nodded absent-mindedly, scribbling something in his notebook between bites of toast. "Leo, are you even listening?" Maya huffed, crossing her arms. "Of course I am," Leo replied, looking up with a grin. "You said you're painting a giant tree with all the seasons on it." "You're so weird," Maya muttered, though she couldn't hide her smile. Their father chuckled. "Leo's got his head in the clouds again, I see. What's the mystery of the day?" Leo tapped his pen against his notebook. "Nothing yet, but something's bound to happen. It always does." He was right. Later that day, as Leo was walking home from school, he passed the Pine Grove Library. It was an old building, its stone walls covered in ivy, and its windows framed by heavy wooden shutters. Leo loved the library. It was a quiet place where he could get lost in stories or research something that caught his interest. But today, something was different. The front door of the library stood ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Leo paused, narrowing his eyes. Mrs. Harper, the librarian, was meticulous about locking the doors after hours. It was already well past closing time. Curiosity got the better of him. Leo pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing in the stillness. The library was dim, the only light coming from a few dusty windows. Rows of books stretched out before him, their spines glowing faintly in the soft light. Everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. Then he heard it, a faint rustling sound coming from the back of the room. Leo's heart began to race. He moved cautiously, weaving his way through the shelves toward the sound. As he rounded the corner, he froze. A girl about his age was crouched on the floor, holding an old leather-bound book. Her blonde hair fell over her face as she flipped through the pages frantically, muttering to herself. She didn't notice Leo until he cleared his throat. "What are you doing here?" Leo asked. The girl jumped, nearly dropping the book. She looked up, her green eyes wide with surprise. "Who are you?" she demanded, holding the book close to her chest. "I could ask you the same thing," Leo replied. "This place is supposed to be closed." The girl hesitated, as if debating whether to answer. Finally, she sighed. "My name's Sophie. I'm looking for something." "In the dark?" Leo asked, raising an eyebrow. Sophie bit her lip. "It's important, okay? I don't have time to explain." Leo glanced at the book in her hands. It looked ancient, its cover decorated with strange symbols he didn't recognize. "What's so special about that book?" he asked. "I told you, it's none of your business," Sophie snapped. But Leo could see the worry in her eyes, the way her fingers trembled as she held the book. She was hiding something. "Look," Leo said, softening his tone. "I'm not going to tell anyone you're here. I just want to help." Sophie looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he could be trusted. Finally, she sighed again and held out the book. "This is what I'm looking for," she said quietly. "It's my grandmother's journal. She used to work here at the library years ago. Before she passed away, she told me that this book contained a secret, something valuable. I've been trying to find it ever since." Leo's curiosity deepened. He took a step closer. "A secret? What kind of secret?" Sophie shook her head. "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But it's not easy. Some of the pages are missing." Leo frowned. "Missing? Like someone tore them out?" "Exactly," Sophie said, looking frustrated. "I think someone didn't want the secret to be found." Leo felt a thrill of excitement. This was no ordinary book and no ordinary mystery. Maybe I can help you. Two heads are better than one, right? Sophie hesitated again, then nodded slowly. Okay, but you'd better not mess this up. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Leo and Sophie spent every afternoon at the library, poring over books, maps, and old records in search of clues. They pieced together bits of information from the journal, references to hidden rooms, forgotten treasures, and mysterious symbols that seemed to appear throughout Pine Grove's history. Look at this, Leo said one afternoon, pointing to a map of the library. There's a small room here, behind the basement. It's not marked on any of the newer blueprints. Sophie leaned over the map, her eyes bright with excitement. You think it's still there? There's only one way to find out, Leo replied. That evening, they snuck into the library after dark. Armed with flashlights and Sophie's grandmother's journal, they made their way down to the basement. The air was cool and musty, and the wooden stairs creaked under their weight. This place is kind of creepy, Sophie whispered, shining her flashlight around the room. Creepy, but exciting, Leo said, grinning. They searched the basement carefully, tapping on walls and checking for anything unusual. Finally, Leo's flashlight caught something, a small crack in the far wall. Sophie, over here, he whispered. Together they pushed against the wall. Slowly it gave way, revealing a narrow passage that led into darkness. Sophie's eyes widened. This is it, she said breathlessly. They stepped through the opening, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The passage led to a small hidden room. Inside, they found an old wooden chest covered in dust. Leo's heart pounded as he knelt beside it. Do you think this is it? Sophie asked, her voice shaking slightly. Only one way to find out, Leo replied. He lifted the lid. Inside the chest were stacks of old letters, photographs, and a small metal box. Sophie reached for the box with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a locket, engraved with the same strange symbols from her grandmother's journal. This must be it, Sophie whispered, tears shining in her eyes. My grandmother's secret. Leo smiled. It's more than just a secret. It's a piece of your family's history. They sat together in the hidden room, surrounded by the echoes of the past. For Sophie, it was a connection to someone she loved and lost. For Leo, it was proof that mysteries, real mysteries, were out there, waiting to be discovered. As they left the library that night, Leo looked up at the stars and smiled. He knew this was only the beginning of many adventures to come.